Hey there. Hey everyone. Just having a few little tech hitches here. This is kind of curious. I know what it is. I've got my sunnies on. I can barely see. Well, welcome back. I think I'll just get my glasses on so I can actually see. But anyway, cool. Great to have you here for the reboot of Toolbox TechTalk. Oh, that was a weird experience. The polarizing lenses on my sunnies completely blocked out the screen that I'm looking at. It was just black. It's amazing. Anyway, let me just stop the tunes. Right. I don't know if I can fade them. Here we go. All right. Hey. So I've been off air for a long time from this Toolbox TechTalk gig. Really, it was something that I thought up during COVID, and it turned into a whole thing every Sunday at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, whether it was daylight or whatever, depending on what time of year it was, but basically 1 p.m. on a Sunday, I would just do a live stream. And when COVID finished, I thought, oh, well, you know, I've done my dash. But since then, I've actually kind of missed it. And just in the last week, I ran a online course. It was titled Solar and Battery Standards Update, and had some great students on there asking excellent questions. And it wasn't enough time to get through all of the questions in the course. And so I thought I'd just actually do a live and answer quite a few of those questions and share them with all of you out there. So just to check how things are going with everyone, if you've never used YouTube Live, there's a chat function. And you probably, I don't know if it's on the right-hand side for you, but I have a little box called chat, and I can type in there and answer your questions, or you can ask me questions in the chat. So it'd be great to know who's out there, and I can see Charles is liking the gangster look. Yeah, you know, I got to sort of ham it up a bit because talking about tech and standards can be a bit dull. So there you go. So play a few tunes, get the bling on. And it's become kind of my signature chain these days. I go to conferences, and everyone knows who I am by the gold chain. So, you know, I'm not a very big guy. This is the way I stand out. So it's a bit of fun anyway. So thanks Charles, for typing that in there. Yeah, so just to set the ground rules here, what we're going to be talking about is some questions that relate to Australian and New Zealand standards. And I've got a special exemption from standards for being able to use some excerpts from them. So I'm just going to make sure that that's really clear. Let's have a look here. So if I bring that up. Okay, so I got copyright permission to use excerpts from the following standards. Now, I actually am on the committee, or several committees for Standards Australia, which is joint with Standards New Zealand. Standards New Zealand actually is a great organisation to deal with. I just reached out to them to see if I could use excerpts for training purposes only. I can't publish the documents as a whole. I can only use excerpts from them, and it's for my electrical students, which is you guys. I just saw in the chat, g'day Ray, you're back. And a few friendly faces there. Yeah, so just to let you know that anything that I'm showing you here is covered by a copyright license permission. Standards can be pretty harsh for people who breach copyright. They will chase you down. So don't go offering copies of the standards that you've bought or through your organisation have acquired and share them with others. The other thing I should tell you about too is how to get copies of the standards for free. Now, this is not a dodgy thing. So let me just bring that back. I'm going to have to do a little bit of moving back and forth between. I've got 6 screens here. I've got 2 computers, iPads, cameras. It's a bit chaotic at times. But what I want to tell you about is something known as the Smart Installer Program. And if I can get that up on screen... Where's it gone now? It should be showing me. Got a slight problem. I've got too many desktops open. Bear with me. And yes, g'day, Galen. That's right, the early iPhones were unreadable when polarized. None of my screens are working, they've all gone black. So what I want to share with you is, as I mentioned before, how to get copies of the standards for free legally. And it's through the Smart Energy Council. The Smart Energy Council have standards that are exactly their members' use. Now, I'm still struggling with this. Maybe I'll just pull this out. Yeah, here we go. I've worked it out. So what you're looking at there is the web page for the Smart Installer program. Say industry representative industry, and broadly the smart energy industry includes all sorts of things like batteries, hydrogen, all things good. That's kind of what it's all about. I used to be on the board some years ago. I was the vice president for about 6 years, but these days I'm just an ordinary member. Now, they acquired through an agreement with Standards New Zealand the ability to share copies of 15 of the relevant standards for free as a part of your membership. But wait for it, the membership is free also. So if you go down here and you'll see the inclusions, and the inclusions are free access to Australian, New Zealand solar and battery standards, and a whole bunch of other things which are free. Now, how can it be free? Generally, people say if it's free, it's too good to be true. Well, it's not free in the sense that no one's paid for it, but you're not paying for it. The patrons are paying for it. Now, this is a big shout out to these companies who actually funded this for, look, I'm not sure how long, maybe it might be just for a year or so, so don't leave it too long before you take advantage of this offer. And so here are some of the companies that provided funding to make available for you 15 of the solar and battery standards that our industry uses as guidance on safety and compliance. So there you go. Thank you to those companies. Now, to join, you really just have to click on the sign up option here somewhere on the page and put in a few details. So there's no catches. You don't have to pay any money after 1 month or anything like that. It's completely free. So please go ahead and do that, and then you'll have your own legitimate copies of 15 standards. Now, they're valued at about $5,000 all up. So it is an amazing offer if you ask me. I'm very pleased that the Smart Energy Council can do this for the industry. And also a big shout out to Standards New Zealand for making it possible. They've been great to deal with, both for me and for the industry in general. Anyway, let's dive into some stuff here. Now, for those who have just joined, this is a live stream, and so if you want to type in some questions into the chat, so far I've had about 3 people type some stuff in there just saying hi. I'd love to know where you're from too, so why not just say hi, where you're from, and I get a sense of where my audience is based. This live stream also will be available after it's finished. So if you have to nip out and can't get to the end, you can just watch it as a regular YouTube after the event is finished. So let me go into questions now. So where are we? Oh, g'day, Garth. Hi, Garth. It's been a long time. Maybe you're coming to the All Energy Show. I'm not sure. G'day, Mark. Oh, from Bitton, Victoria. Oh, Michael from Hobart. Hey, there's a few people out there. Ray from the western suburbs. And By the way, I just mentioned the All Energy Show. Now, I'm not associated with them in any professional capacity. I just attend. It's also free. It's really kind of the biggest gig in Australia after the... So there's two big sort of renewable energy gigs in Australia for Expo of products. One's run by the Smart Energy Council called the Smart Energy Expo, and that's usually in Sydney. And then there's the All Energy Show in Melbourne. Now, All Energy's actually this coming week, so the 23rd and 24th, the Wednesday, Thursday this week, at Jeff's Shed at the Melbourne Exhibition and Conference Centre, I think it's officially called. It's free to get in. It's an amazing expo, like more than 10,000 people will be milling around looking at all the latest renewable energy tech. So if you happen to be in Melbourne, it's a great place to come. There's also a lot of side events from various companies. So if you're in the industry, you might have been a beautiful place. Charles asked, what's my thoughts on hydrogen? So I've got no experience or expertise at hydrogen other than I have visited a hydrogen factory here in Melbourne and got a very thorough tour of it and an explanation of the technology and how it can be used for diesel generator replacement using fuel cells and hydrogen as a source. I guess I'm not a convinced follower of hydrogen yet. I think it's got a few challenges. Let's not go down the Hindenburg track. I'm just thinking in terms of the practicality of having to compress it, transport it, store it. It's very... But then again, it is a potentially a renewable energy source if you're doing it fully from green energy. Compressing it using that same source, and then maybe you're transporting it in an electric vehicle or using it directly on site. It's definitely a green alternative. But so things like vehicles, I have my doubts. It takes a lot to change. Energy, electric energy monkey from Fiji. Oh wow, that's great. You're my member at the moment, and g'day Melbourne. Okay. Okay, so Ray's saying, are you looking at the SIG Energy DC EV charger? All right, let me add that to my list. I've actually got a little list of topics here, and just typing it in there. All right, so first up, I had a question. Now, for those who just joined, a lot of the questions have come from my students from the course the week just past, and I thought I'd answer some of these because we didn't have enough time to answer all of them during the course. One of the questions was, can we remove DC isolators, so-called rooftop isolators on a PV array, and fit a disconnection point? Safe by you to bring all of the system. If you modify any of those things, power, voltage, or current, you are required to bring a component within a PV array, whether it's modifying any of those factors is a consideration. The other one is if you actually... So that may be the case. Just checking how the stream's going. Yep. YouTube keeps flashing up these little messages in front of me every so often saying that my stream speed's a bit low, but no one's mentioned it yet. Reality is that a DC isolator has really only been required in Australia, not New Zealand. Oh my gosh, it says Glenn is more frozen than moving. Oh, that's a bit of a bother. I wonder why. Okay, well, I'll just press on. If it gets too hard for you to watch, so oh boy, lots of people are saying buffering. I'm sad to hear that. Such as the internet. Charles said it must be all the bling. It's creating buffering. Toolbox, there we go. And switching to overhead. All right, so what you're now looking at is me drawing to explain something. So the question is, if the PV array is made up of 10 strings, is it? No, nine strings, and each string has an ISC of 10.7 amps. A couple of considerations there. Pretty much definitely would have to have string over current protection once you started getting that many strings in parallel. There is a formula for when it's required, but typically it kicks in around the 3 to 4 mark of parallel strings. And we need to have a safety margin on top of our ISC of 1.25. Now that's something that's been in all of our PV array standards, and so the standard that this applies to is 5033. In fact, the way to think about it is that all of the DC side of a PV array are the standard. So there's our safety margin. Then we got to multiply it by the number of strings, and that's going to give us our string maximum, our PV array cable maximum current. So just to calculate that, 10.7 times 1.25 times 9 equals, so that's 120 amps. Well, to be exact, 120.4 amps. And so there's, here we go. So that means that we've got to select a cable that's rated appropriately for carrying 120 amps. It means also that all of the DC components within 120 amps. Now, what that would mean is any switching, any connections, such as connections to the inverter. If you actually had a DC input to the inverter via a plug and socket or wired connection, it would have to be rated to be able to carry the fault current plus the safety margin times the number of parallel strings, and therefore that's a pretty large number. But anyway, that must have been a commercial system, I would imagine, that student was asking me about. Now, just checking about this buffering problem. YouTube's now telling me my connection is excellent. Just let me know if the nasty buffering's gone away. Okay. That was that question. And what's the next one? Yeah, this is a little bit of a experiment for me with this particular setup here. I've got a dedicated connection from Optus, and I've got a separate Starlink connection. The Starlink one is generally great, except for uploading. So I'm actually using the Optus point-to-point connection at the moment, which is usually good for about 15 to 20 megabits per second. And I'm streaming it at 3.1 megabits per second now for about 3 to 5 megabits per second. So there should be plenty of headroom there. But of course, in Harvey Bay 1, now this is a 50 kilowatt inverter. So what's sort of unusual about the Core 1 is that it sits on a roof, basically out in the open. It's not like something you bolt to a wall. It plonks down on a flat roof. See if I can find a picture of one while I'm talking. Where's my other screen gone? Laptop, there we go. Okay, SMA Core 1, there we go. Once I've got it loaded, I'll bring that over so you can see. And there we go. Oh, it's always one of these little things you've got to say thank you, we love you. Cookies on Well, there it is anyway. I can't see where to click for the cookies. But yeah, that's an SMA Core 1 there. And as you can see, it's a big boxy thing, weighs a lot, and it sits flat on a roof. I don't know if they've got a roof picture of it. The future of commercial PV systems. I can't get rid of the cookie thing. Oh, sorry about that. But anyway, let's come back to me explaining what the question is about. So the person who's installing this Core 1 is actually installing 5 of them. It's a big commercial system in New Zealand, and they're asking me about the requirement to have an AC isolator adjacent to the inverter. Now, the requirement in 4777 Part 1, which is our standard for inverter systems connected to an electrical installation. Now, it used to be kind of very much a grid-focused standard, but we've now realized that inverters are used in lots of ways, not just connecting to grids. They can be standalone inverters. They can be a portable product. So we've actually widened the scope of 4777 Part 1, just published this year, 2024 edition, to include a wider range of applications. So we've got a commercial installation with 5 of these Core 1s, and the requirement for an AC isolator within 3 meters and line of sight of the inverter, unless the switchboard to which it's connected is within 3 meters and line of sight. Now, because this is a roof where they're installing it, there's no switchboard on a roof. It would be an awful place. Switches adjacent to every single of 3.2. Now, I'm not sure if I've got that handy on screen. Yes, I have. Maybe I can actually bring this over onto the... Let's see if I can get it on there. Okay, there we go. Got the clause there. Right, so this is a clause I'm referring to. And the third paragraph down, where it says, where a group of inverters are co-located and at least one inverter of the group is within 3 meters and fully visible from the switchboard to which it's connected, the isolation in the switchboard of each inverter may also be used for inverters within the same group that are within more than 3 meters visible from the switchboard. It's a bit of a mouthful when you read it out. Effectively means that you still need to have a point of isolation that is adjacent in a switchboard, but within 3 meters of one of the group. But the rest of the group may well be more than 3 meters away, but are supplying that same switchboard. So yeah, it's still requires a switchboard, but it doesn't require a switch next to every single inverter. That's kind of the advantage of this clause. There's also another part to this clause, 3532, which is the fact that when you are connecting more than 2 inverters to a switchboard, you need to have an aggregation point, aggregate multiple inverter AC isolators in their own dedicated switchboard, sometimes called a marshalling board or an aggregation board. It can't have any other loads. It can only have as inputs, as energy sources, feed from inverters, and the output of that switchboard is just a single submain that will then supply either the main switchboard or a subsequent supply where it enters will be known as a main switch inverter. So you'll end up with just one main switch inverter for all of the inverter systems, or IESs is what we call them, installed. And that aggregation board is aggregating individual inverters, or IESs, into one IES group. So, that better explains this, if I can find it for you quickly. Not having much luck. No. Oh, yes, I found it. Ha! Just when I was about to give up. If I bring that, the arrangement of multiple inverters connect to, in this case, 2 marshalling boards. So quite often in a commercial installation, you might have several locations within the building that systems that are installed, and you might have multiple marshalling boards. So if you look at the notes that are attributed to this clause, if I can bring up my little drawing pen here. So you might see down the bottom here, it says Note 3, inverter AC isolator. So Note 3 is each of the inverters actually has an isolator feeding the board, but that 3 meter rule means at least one of these 3 inverters is within 3 meters in line of sight of that switchboard. The others could be further away, but they all feed this switchboard. Then the switch that feeds the submain that leaves this board, this Note 2 here, is got a special label which is main isolated grid, because the grid comes in at this point. But and then the output of that goes to, in this case, the main switchboard, though it could actually be a subsequent DB. And that Note 1 says that's the only main switch inverter. Turning that switch off, you actually group. So there you go. And this is all very much what you'd expect in a commercial installation. You might notice too that we've got here a label that says main switch inverter, and it's red text on white background. That's actually not a requirement per se. It threw me a bit when the standard was published, even though I'm on the committee. I'm not on every meeting, and I think I missed a few. And so I went, oh my gosh, we've got to have this new color for main switch inverter. And there's actually a few more shown in the standard. But actually, it comes from 3000. 3000 says that you need to differentiate main switches from other circuits within the same switchboard. And differentiation can be by many means. It can be by color, by location, by grouping. So here's a simple way of doing it, is that just the label for the switch itself has got a different color from the labels for switches for circuits, which aren't main switches. So there you go. Cool. Just looking down at the chat here, Ray asks your thoughts on all-in-one battery and inverter systems like SIG Energy, Tesla Powerwall versus individual components. Yeah, let me just switch back to me. So I've been in this industry for too long, really over 30 years now, and it was pretty much the norm, certainly in the off-grid world where I came from. You build systems out of components. You'd take an inverter, some batteries, some isolation equipment, some overcurrent protection, some panels, some charge controllers, some monitoring, and some control, and all of that. So what we've seen is making systems more efficient. It's a bit like a kit, basically. It might come in several packages, but once you just join them all together with all the components that are made for them, without making there's no goes away when you've got an all-in-one solution. So what am I saying? I think there is a move towards the all-in-one products. Many companies who have been either just an inverter company or just a battery company are now starting to bring into their suite the all-in-one solutions. And mainly it is about cost and efficiency. Some of those systems, I'm not familiar with the Tesla Powerwall 3, but I certainly am with SIG Energy, because we've installed it, a few of them two of them here at the lab and one elsewhere. They were very simple. People keep using the analogy, it's just like Lego because there's no wires. You're just plugging everything together, screwing it to the walls, running your AC and DC cables to the unit. And very, very simple. So having units that are pre-designed as a whole, to me, makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you think about other components, other products that we owned, you don't buy a car in pieces, tires from one people and the engine from another. You don't buy an air conditioner where the head unit comes from brand A and the outdoor unit comes from brand B. So all of these things are integrated for a reason. And I think that's the way we're going with energy storage and generation systems, particularly in the domestic market where it's a small footprint, a product has to be installed for a price, and to meet that all-in-one seems to have somewhat of an advantage. Okay, let's hope that answers your question, Ray. All right, now next question from my list. This is a kind of question for New Zealand viewers. So in New Zealand, the way standards are kind of made law is through a regulation, that is Parliament, basically. It's currently known as the New Zealand Electrical Regulations. Somewhat after that, but a small amendment. But basically, in 2010 was when the renewable energy regulations or electrical regulations were kind of signed into law. And they reference particular standards that at the time were current. And a lot has happened in the ensuing decade or more. So, for instance, some of the standards were signed in that date back more than 20 years. And so they're extremely out of date. There's been a lot of grumbles about this, but really it's a political kind of, the minister has to make the call to update the regs, and it's not as simple as I thought it would be. Apparently they have to do something like 300 standards. It's not just our favourite ones. So let's hope that Simeon Brown, the new energy minister in New Zealand, keeps his word, because he did announce at CANS that he would fast track updating of New Zealand electricity regulations to bring them in line with current standards. So the question really comes about with the battery standard, NZS 5139. Now that's a joint standard with New Zealand. It was published in 2019, and it's of course not referenced in New Zealand electricity regulations because it was only published in 2019, the very first edition, and therefore it didn't exist when the regs were being formed. The interesting statement that I've had from New Zealand, from WorkSafe New Zealand, is that even though this is a standard that's not referenced in New Zealand electricity regulations, it could be used in a court of law as an practice. Now, what that kind of means is that you haven't complied with 5.1, but a court of law of incompetence if you didn't follow. I mean, the old standard 4086 Part 2 was written for lead acid, nickel iron, and nickel cadmium batteries, and it was totally inappropriate in New Zealand. It's your call, but it's good advice. All right, looking to see if there's any questions coming in. Let's have a look here. The next one is how to calculate arc flash intensity and boundary from manufacturers' data sheets. Okay, so I've actually made a spreadsheet which I share with my students, and it's just an Excel spreadsheet, and I've got a copy of it on the screen here. Let's have a look. All right, there it is. Bring that over and see if I can make it a bit bigger. Yeah, so arc flash is a requirement in the new battery standards to calculate the two factors. One is incident energy and the other is what's called the protection boundary. The boundary, if you enter, you must wear the appropriate PPE. Let's see if I can kind of get it big but not missing anything. There we go. So the factors that affect arc flash are system voltage, multiplying factor, and multiplying factor is all about how you install it. If it's in a room, multiplying factor is 1.5. If it's outdoors in the open space, multiply a room or sit back confined, then like if a switchboard, you open the doors and it explodes, it's going to blast all of the energy straight at you. In the case of a battery system, in the case of a battery like a lead acid battery without a multiplying factor of 1.5, and the working distance, which basically means you're within 45 centimeters of that unit, and that's kind of a given, basically it's arm's reach when you're working on something, it doesn't change, it's always 45 centimeters. So what I've done is a little red light, sort of traffic light system here. What you're aiming for is it to be green. Green is insignificant risk. That means less than 1.2 cal per square centimeter. What that means is holding, or what that is equivalent to, is holding your hand over a candle at 1 inch for 1 second. And that'll give you a incident energy of 1.2 cal. So not enough to actually damage your skin, but you start to feel the heat. So if it's insignificant, then there's no PPE requirements, and really that's where you want to try and get down to that level. The next step up is between 1.2 and 4, and that's the 4 is as high as you can go inside a domestic installation. So for instance, in a garage within a home, it has to be below 4 cal, and 8 installation, but not inside the building, so outside the building, and you really have to be below 40. That's just catastrophic. So that would be in industrial commercial applications. So this one's red, which is basically inside a garage or a building associated or attached to a domestic dwelling. But not inter, but anyway, meaning that within the string of cells, there is overcurrent protection. So if you short circuit the output of the protection device is after what period of time, you can put that in there. So a fuse or a circuit breaker, how quickly it can trip. And so by changing just the arcing time, by putting an intra current, this is probably more applicable for individual cell installations, but you're actually installing systems made up of 2-volt cells, old school lead acid perhaps, but it can be applied to any system built of individual cells. So there's our 24 cells, and each cell is, if it's lead acid for instance, 2 volts per cell. And so that will give me a 48 volt nominal system, and there's my positive and there's my negative. Now what you normally would do is, remember this is a plan view looking down, a top-down view, is that you would just have 2 rows of cells or batteries themselves to bring the negative back towards where the positive is, so they're both located in the same piece. Now, that would be, if these are, let's say 1000 amp hour lead acid cells, typically they would have around a 10 Ka bolted fault current, so IBF, and therefore that example I just gave you would apply, and so fuse there. And that then brings the arcing time down to the trip time for that fuse, and therefore it's a very, very small arc flash intensity. Now there is an updated version of my spreadsheet that one of my students, Niall, thank you Niall, produced during the course, and I'll see if I can find a way of sharing that with you in the description when this video is finished. I'll pop it down in the description so you can download it. So it's I've just put a reminder in there about All Energy for those who joined late. All Energy this week, lack of consistency. So what I've done is produce some. Where's it gone now? I've lost one of my screens. That's overhead. That's a intermediary subboard to which let's make it a bit bigger for you. Let's have a look. If I can bring that a look. If I can bring that up a little bit bigger. There we go. Made it a bit big as I can. So there you go. So all of those labels are compliant with the latest versions of 4777 Part 1 and 5033. This is a grid tie system Part 1 and 5033. This is a grid tie system without batteries. And I even confirmed now these are also going to be publicly available. I'm producing a bunch of them, but so far I've only done a couple. They're sort of an update of what the CEC started some years ago, which was, but that was produced by their accreditation department, and they've since decided not to renew managing accreditation, and now it's being managed by Solar Accreditation Australia. So that's why there's been a change. So cheat sheets, they hopefully quite useful. The other reason I produced them is I was very frustrated by the way that people would mislabel things. Now, when you buy a label kit from whatever supplier, different kinds of systems. So let's say you're getting a label kit for batteries, and there'll be a whole bunch of battery-specific signs in there. It doesn't mean you have to put every one of them on there, because some of them are related to the particular hazard of a particular chemistry. So let me just pick on one, because it's my favorite one, which is the big green electrolyte spillage sign. Now, it says in the battery standard that's for a risk of hazardous chemicals, and that would be something with with a liquid electrolyte. These days, there's very few batteries that have liquid electrolytes. Really, it would be old school flooded lead acid batteries, nickel cadmium wet cells. Don't go anywhere near those; they're just so toxic. And then you've got some flow batteries like the zinc bromine red flow battery or similar. So there's very few that actually have liquid that can spill. So don't go putting that green electrolyte spillage sign on the front of your lovely lithium-ion battery. It's not going to spill electrolyte. However, if you do choose to put it there, you actually have to provide bunding to capture the spillage. So you're kind of making work for yourself. Bunding is basically a capture for the spillage of hazardous chemicals. So, yep, don't go there. So that's one of my favorites. The other one, which is kind of a little bit confusing, is toxic fume hazard and risk of explosion. Now, this 5139, the battery standard, says in the table 3.1, which lists some different chemistries of batteries and what the risk factors are and whether they apply. They have a little tick to show if it applies. List lithium-ion batteries as toxic fume hazard, tick, and then explosion hazard with a note. And it says some lithium batteries will release hydrogen in fault conditions. So how do you find out if your particular lithium battery releases hydrogen in a fault condition? That's what the safety data sheet's for. So the safety data sheet is a federal requirement, both in Australia and New Zealand, a government requirement in New Zealand for any hazardous goods to have a safety data sheet provided by the manufacturer. It's a requirement to have the safety data sheet on site, and I checked with Energy Safety Victoria, and their attitude is it needs to be not just on site, it needs to be at the main switchboard and it needs to be a hard copy. It can't be a QR code that you scan. The reason for that is there may not be internet access where you are. QR codes can get damaged and unreadable easily. So yeah, it has to be a physical copy. So that safety data sheet should list whether there is a explosion hazard associated with the battery system and determine whether you need to put the risk of battery explosion sign on the unit. Okay, I'm just checking the time. I should have said at the beginning, we are actually going to wrap at 2 o'clock, so 1 hour long. It's Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, different for you guys in Queensland and New Zealand and WA and the rest of the world. Fiji, Fiji, you're way ahead. So, yeah, that's the signage question. Next question was accreditation. So accreditation in Australia came about as a result of a federal government initiative to encourage the uptake of solar. And the way it was done was to provide a system. And it has evolved in various steps. I won't go through all the evolutions, but effectively you're creating what's known as small-scale technology certificates, and those are tradable and therefore can be offered as an upfront discount for systems up to 100 kilowatts. But in order to be able to create those certificates, they have to be installed by an appropriately accredited installer. And the accreditation scheme in Australia has different categories. There's solar design and install, there's with batteries design and install, there's standalone power system design and install. I'm not sure if they're still around, but there used to be wind as well, wind energy systems. And those two components, design and install, actually can be separate accreditations. So you might actually have someone who's an accredited designer and someone who's an accredited installer. The scheme used to be run for many years by the Clean Energy Council, but it recently transitioned over to to an organisation called Solar Accreditation Australia, SAA for short. They were formed as a consortium between master electricians and the Smart Energy Council as a separate organisation. So they're a standalone organisation, but they're kind of, I'm not sure what the corporate structure is, but they were formed by that collaboration between master electricians and the Smart Energy Council. The design and supervise can of worms. All right, Garth, I'll go there. This is really a bit of trivia for those who are old enough to remember design and supervise was a category that you could have for accreditation, which basically, like me, I come from an electronics background, so I'm not a licensed electrician. I can't install LV systems, but I could design them and I could supervise an electrician who wasn't accredited to install them. But that was a accreditation category that was phased out long ago, but it was grandfathered. What that means is anyone who actually had that accreditation could keep it until they fell off the perch. But unfortunately, there's probably about 100 or so people in that category in Australia. The Clean Energy Regulator wasn't very happy with that legacy, that grandfathering, and decided it had to end. So basically, no more grandfathers. And now you actually have to get an electrical license. You can't be design and supervise anymore. Personally, I knew it would eventually happen. My business isn't based on it. Some people's were, and so it was a really big impost on their business. Like they may have built up a business around being the expert on designing systems and making sure through supervision that they were correctly installed by licensed electricians. But that's no longer the case. And they did give a little extension till, I think it's middle of next year, by which time the doors will close completely. So yeah, that's the can of worms, Garth. So there you go. Okay, got just a few minutes to go. Maybe the last one, which I'll weave into answering Ray's question about DC EV charging as well. The question was, can I use my electric vehicle to power my home? Now, this is one of the exciting things about 4777 Part 1, the 2024 edition, is we've got a lot to say about that. A lot of good things, which is basically, yes, you can. You can power your home, you can power the grid. But of course, there's a few hurdles in that process. One is the grid operator has to accept that you're going to power the grid. You also have to meet the safety requirements of a vehicle to home or vehicle to grid installation. And there are only 2 modes which are permitted. Now, this is a little bit techie. Maybe I've got a slide for this. But vehicles that can be charged, we call them modes. And here we go. Got a slide for that. Where are we? Keynote. So here I'm showing the 4 modes of ways that a vehicle can be charged. Modes 1 and 2 are not permitted for vehicle to grid or vehicle to home. So mode 1 is where you basically just got a plug that goes straight from a wall outlet to the car, and there's no fault current protection. Mode 2 is pretty much what most EVs will come with as standard, which is a home charger, something that plugs into a wall outlet. It does have fault current protection in a separate device, and which is sort of like a big blunt brick thing, and that plugs into your car. Only modes 3 and 4 are permitted as bidirectional, and therefore mode 3 is your permanently fitted electric vehicle AC supply unit, so something that goes on the wall and it has a cable that connects to the vehicle, and it's got some smarts in it. And the 4th way is a DC permanently fitted charger, and I would suggest mode 3 is probably never going to happen because it would require the vehicle's inverter, because it's a kind of a misnomer. People refer to those wall boxes as EV chargers. They're not. They're supply equipment. They're basically providing AC power to your car. Your car has the charger in it. So it converts AC power to DC and charges your battery. And in that case, with mode 3, if you want to reverse that process, the inverter in the car to supply the home or grid, it needs to be compliant with 4777 Part 2, our inverter test standard. I can't see car manufacturers going down that path, just for a small market segment called Australia and New Zealand. Mode 4, though, is definitely the way to go. It's where you have a DC charger, and it's directly connecting to the battery's DC system, and the DC charger is the inverter as well. It converts from AC to DC and vice versa. So it has to be 4777 compliant, and that's already available. So there's been a few products in the Australian market, not sure about New Zealand. So we had, I'll just jump out of this slide, we had the Wallbox Quasar, the Mark 1 model, and apparently Mark 2 is coming. The Wallbox Quasar was a 10 kilowatt bidirectional charger, first installed in South Australia, I believe. But it only suits a particular type of connector called the Chatamo. Chatamo is really kind of a Japanese standard. So only a few cars actually have that type of DC coupling. That would be like your Nissan Leaf, I think a MyEV, and there's one other I can think of, but I can't think of. But Type 2 CCS, which is pretty much all vehicles now, except those few I mentioned, they currently only have, that I can think of, is one option, which is the SIG Energy DC EV charger. So SIG Energy is an all-in-one solution, batteries stacked on top of each other, a DC EV charger in 12.5 or 25 kilowatt rating, and then an inverter on top of that. It's all just basically a pile of beautiful white blocks that provides you storage, conversion, and generation. And that module is bidirectional. I've seen it working in China with a Neo, which is a Chinese brand of EV, running basically appliances directly. So yeah, it's here now. So 4777 Part 1 has kind of given us the roadmap for vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. We just need a few network operators to permit it, and also the vehicles to permit it. So of course, Some people raise the issue, maybe there's a warranty consideration there, that the fact that you're now using the vehicle in a way it wasn't originally designed as a transport vehicle, you're using it as energy storage. We'll see what happens there. I see another question from what percentage of detached homes are on single phase versus three phase because of the limits of feed-in limits from home to grid. Feed-in limits from home to grid. No, I don't. That's a good question. I'd love to know if anyone does in the chat there. Maybe you could let me know. Probably this data is available, but three phase not that common in older suburbs. Certainly, three phase is probably more common in newer developments and places with large appliances such as split air conditioners, where you've got a multi-split. They tend to have such a high power demand that you actually need three phase to run them. So yeah, maybe some of those big Queenslanders. Yeah, so anyway, we've come to the end of the first of the reboot of Toolbox Tech Talk, and I got about halfway through all the questions. I plan to do this, continue this show at the same time slot, though I have to occasionally skip a Sunday when I'm overseas or family commitments, but I'll try and keep it a bit regular. So thanks for watching, and I'll see what I can do about that buffering problem. Yeah, a bit surprised by that. So to everyone, check it. Till next time. Bye, everyone.